Hi, this is Michael with Bleepin Jeep. You've commented about it, you've asked for it, you've waited for it. So it is my honor to introduce the Bleepin Jeep TJ. This is my 97 Jeep Wrangler TJ. 97 was the very first year they made the TJ, so some of the guts are the same as they are on the YJ. So I want to tell you what I want to do on this channel. I want to tell you about my Jeep. I want to tell you a little about me and my Jeep and mechanic experience. But first, we'll jump into the thing you care about the most. Let me tell you about the Jeep. So, bought my TJ 3 years ago from a man who told me he intended to give it as a gift to his son. His son did something stupid, so he couldn't give it to him anymore, so he sold it to me. At the time, it had no top. It was running on 37s despite stock Dana 30 and Dana 35 axles. That's a big problem. And it just needed some love. It had been flogged pretty hard by somebody in its history. Most of the upgrades you can physically see right now on camera were all done by some previous owner. It has a 4-inch Skyjacker suspension lift, no body lift. That lift was enough to get the 37s under there with some trimming that they did, but the axles really weren't going to hold up to that for very long. It's got 120,000 miles on it. And that's about all I know of its history. So here's some of the things I've done to it already before I started filming, and then I'll tell you about where I like to go with it in upcoming potential projects. First thing I did was I replaced all of the fluids, changed everything out. Some of them, I don't know, they seemed like there was more mud in the front differential than there was oil. So I changed all the fluids. And then the radiator was leaking. So I pulled the whole radiator out to replace it, and while I was in there, I decided just to do the whole thing. So everything that had to do with the cooling system came out except the heater core. So new hoses, new water pump, new thermostat, everything put back in, sealed up. And in fact, it actually made a cooling difference. The Jeep ran a few degrees cooler than it had before. I don't think the system was running efficiently. Next, big project, I was driving along and the rear drive shaft started binding up, causing me to, well, it felt like the parking brake was on in very, very strongly while I was trying to drive. It was a very sudden, scary experience. So the rear drive shaft was binding because of the 4-inch lift with a 1.5-inch transfer case drop, but they hadn't really re-angled the rear axle. So that was only a matter of time before what happened to that happened. So I decided to fix that the right way. I got Curie adjustable rear upper control arms. I got an SYE kit and a Tom Woods drive shaft. Pulled the transfer case and rebuilt the entire transfer case while I was in there, upgraded some of the parts, and then put that back together, put the SYE in, new drive shaft. Lined it up, drove much better. I lost vibration. I was able to gain 1.5 inches of clearance by lifting the transfer skid plate back up where it should be. Lot better. So that was my big project number 2. Big project number 3, I installed Curie Correct Link beefy front steering. The stock steering for a TJ is a long, thin tube that pushes those tires back and forth. And when you're pushing 35s or 37s like it was before on rocks, there's just a lot of risk, I think, that that pipe might fold and buckle. So the Curie system is a solid all the way through. It is heavy, beefy, it's bigger in diameter, and it's core to core all the way full. So I replaced and put that system in. When I did, and it's not Curie's fault at all, but when I did, it exposed a death wobble issue that I had. And I couldn't get over about 30 miles an hour without having some pretty severe death wobble. And I had a pretty bad case of bump steer. Every time I would hit a small bump, the steering wheel would shimmy back and forth. My wife's small Toyota would take speed bumps and corners with a little bump. There's a bump right near our home, and I'd hit it in her car, no big deal. In the Jeep, it was hard to stay in my lane. So I did some research. I didn't know why that was happening. Did some research, and turns out when the lift kit had been installed, the previous owner also installed a drop pitman arm, but didn't relocate the track bar. So because of that, it was causing bump steer. So I pulled the pitman arm, put a stock pitman arm back on, which is the way it should be. Pitman arm, and track bar have to go together. If you don't change your pitman arm, you don't change your track bar. If you don't change your track bar, don't change your pitman arm. They go together. The geometry there is really important. So I put in the Curie system, dropped pitman arm, still had the death wobble. Took me a long time to find it. Matt's got a great video on how to track down death wobble, but mine was in a unique place, not the most common place for many people. It wasn't in the track bar, the lower track bar bolt, and it wasn't in the bushings for the control arms. It was actually the control arm bracket itself on the passenger upper side here in the front. The hole had become slotted and the bolt was loose, but you couldn't see it until you took the whole thing apart. So I was intending to inspect the bushing, and when I took it out, I noticed that the whole axle could move back and forth, and so all it took was a small bump and it would create an oscillating death wobble. So I had brand new heavy-duty brackets welded on, fixed that problem, so no more death wobble. Next big project, and you'll notice these are growing increasingly ambitious, but I am by no means a car expert. This is me learning as I go. I do a ton of research and then just kind of be brave and go for it. Maybe a little stupid too. So last summer, I pulled and rebuilt the entire transmission myself. Put in a new clutch and pulled apart the entire transmission, replaced first gear, most of the synchros, and replaced reverse because they were grinding and I wasn't getting a synchronized first gear. I had to be fully stopped to get into first. So pulled that apart, found the damages, rebuilt it. It took me 6 weeks or 6 weekends mostly to get that whole thing done, wait for parts, put in all new rebuild kit, and get it back in the Jeep and get it working. I'm pretty proud of myself for having done that. So I'll let you know that I'm not that much of a mechanic. I consider myself somewhat handy, but also pretty determined and bullheaded. And so when I get my mind set on a task, I'm gonna research it, I'm gonna figure it out, I'm gonna get it done, probably. So, transmission, that was the last big project. And that catches you up to where I am so far. Here's where I'm going next. A couple of projects on the list. The biggest one is I'm having axle trouble. Running 35s, running 37s before, it's expected. But I don't want to just patch that problem. I want to really fix it the right way. But I'm not a super wealthy man, so I can't just go do some Dana 60, Dana 80, some type of backflip with a handspring tilted. I just can't do that. This is going to have to be something that I do most of the work on myself. So here's where I'm headed on that. Or here's where I am right now and why this has become my next big project. A few months ago, I was in Colorado doing some of the Jeep passes, did Imogene Pass. Was planning to do the Alpine Loop. The day before the Alpine Loop, I was coming down a small gravel road, nothing much going on, and something in my front Detroit locker seems to have malfunctioned, and I broke 2 teeth off the ring gear in the front. Some other Jeepers were friendly enough to help me out and got me towed into Silverton, Colorado, which has one corner shop that's got a garage at it. It was a Friday morning. That's a whole nother story. If you want to hear about it, I'd love to tell you the story because I couldn't do the work. He couldn't do the work for me, but he let me use some of his shop space outside and do the whole project in the parking lot. I'll tell you that story if you care. Let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, so right now my front axle is just freewheeling. There's no axle shafts in at all. It allowed me to get back home to Texas from Colorado. I had a feeling going into that trip that I was going to break an axle, but I thought for sure it's going to be the rear Dana 35, not the Dana 30 that I wasn't having any trouble with. 1,000 miles after I get home, or actually within 1,000 miles, so 500 of it was coming home. Within 500 miles of getting home, I'm driving home from work and the rear differential just decides it's done. So within 1,000 miles of each other, I blow the front and the rear axle. Now I can't go anywhere. So I'm able to limp it to a place where I can get some work done myself. And I find a Craigslist or a Jeep forum. I found a Jeep forum Dana 35 across the country, and I get it shipped in. It's not intended to be my permanent solution, but I need my Jeep back up and running the very next weekend for a big outdoor event I'm doing with some friends. So I pull my old Dana 35, put in the new Dana 35, which happens to come with a limited slip. That's nice, but that's probably gonna make it wear out even faster, I'm guessing, because I'm still running 35-inch tires. So I'm just kind of patched everything together right now. The rear axle won't last forever. I don't really have a front axle. I don't have four-wheel drive right now. And that's my next big, huge project. I'll talk more about that in another video, kind of where I'm thinking I might go, but that's on the list. Other stuff you can expect to see from me on this channel and what I'm gonna do here. I'm not a huge mechanic. I'm not a fabricator like Matt is. I'm not as experienced at this as some of the other guys here on the channel. So what you're gonna get to see from me is a TJ and maybe also kind of a beginner's introduction to some of the stuff. You'll get to learn with me as I learn stuff, as I do stuff. You might see me make some mistakes that you can avoid, maybe some good tips that you can take to that I've learned from somebody else. So there's a lot of maintenance stuff, a lot of little odds and ends, a lot of small upgrades from time to time. My philosophy comes, if I'm replacing something, I want to do my best, if possible, to replace it with the final option. So as I do a Jeep build on this, I'm not looking to build in stages and then switch stuff out. I really want to kind of put everything that I put on to be the last of that thing. I'm sure that's what a lot of people who said when they started out, but that's my hope, is to kind of go right to the last thing and not spend any money and time with an intermediate step if I can avoid it. A big thing to note though is that this is my daily driver. I use this every day to get to work. It gets me to the office and home. So that means all the projects that I do need to, one, be something I can do in a weekend or so. Otherwise I'm not really able to get around. Two, it still needs to be roadworthy. So I'm not looking to make a super monster rock crawler. 35s is plenty for me. I just want it to be really capable. I want it to go anywhere that I want to go. I don't mind playing on the rocks. I like going to Colorado, but I live in Texas. So here in Texas, there's not nearly as much rocks to crawl on. We're not as Jeep playground friendly, unless you like the mud. And I know a lot of guys do. Mud's not quite my thing, quite as much. I don't feel it's nearly as challenging. So I like the camping, the overlanding, some of the rock mountain trails in Colorado. And I want to build so that I can drive it well on the street. And I want to build so that I can drive it well off-road. Right now, I can't really take it off-road hardly at all because I don't have four-wheel drive. And as you notice, I also don't have a winch. So that probably needs to be coming here pretty soon too. But you tell me in the comments below, what do you want to see on a TJ? You've been asking for this for such a long time. So what do you want to see done on a TJ? What projects do you want to know about that I've already done? What things do you want to see me do and add to it? What questions do you have? If I don't know the answer, maybe somebody else does, or we can learn together about TJs, Jeep Wranglers. So if you're excited that Bleepin Jeep has a TJ, make sure you hit the thumbs up, like, share this video. It really helps us to be able to keep great content like this coming. Also, be sure to check out BleepinJeep.com for all the best off-road Jeep stuff on the internet with none of the really boring stuff. That you can get cool t-shirts there, stickers, things like that that make your off-road experience even better. So I'm Michael with Bleepin Jeep, and I'll see you soon.